Hey guys, so in this video, we're learning how to capture numbers from your users, right? So we have two different functions, numeric input function and slider input function. But we have two different lines for slider input function. So the first one, we collect a single number from the users, right? The second slider function, we want to capture a range of numbers, right? Just like here, from 10 to 20, right? And the difference between numeric input function and slider input function. So as you can see, numeric input function has this drop down menu. So it's easy for the user to select a precise number. However, the slider input function, it could be hard to select a precise number when you have large range of numbers and if the user is using your app on a small cell phone, right? Can you imagine that? All right, so let's do this in our studio. All right, so this is from the previous exercise. All right, so let's close this out. Go to File tab, Save As, and this will be 2.2.3. Save. Now let's go to Textbook to get the code. Come back, and you replace the UI code here, Control V. Run app, save selected. All right, so again, the first argument, num, num2, rng, these are input ID, right? And the second input value here is the label. And note that again, as it was the case in the previous exercise, the third argument on, you have argument's name because each input function has different arguments. Well, not in this case because they're all collecting numbers. So third argument in both numeric input function, slider input function, argument's name is value. But that wasn't the case in the previous exercise, right? When we were capturing text input. Um, so all right. So the number one again is a label. So label shows up number one. Number two, range. Those are all labels, right? And then a value. So in numeric input function, value equals 0. So 0, that's the default number. So that is the number that shows up here. The number 2, the default value is 50 because the 50 is the value that's provided for the value argument. And then the second slider input, right? The value is a vector of two numbers, 10 and 20. So this is a way to capture a range of numbers, right? So you can change this, overriding the default value, right? You can change that. And also in the slider input function, there's a 0. The range of possible values that the user can choose is between 0 and 100. That's because here, minimum and maximum. The numeric input function has also minimum and maximum arguments. So if you click on, so you can go down, but it doesn't go below 0. And then you can go up. And it's not going to go above 100. That is the maximum, right? Okay, so let me close this out. And in console, let's look into numeric input function, numeric input. So it brings up the documentation for this numeric input function when you start with a question mark, right? So you can read the information about this function. So for example, here, numeric input, we have these arguments, input ID, right? Label, and then value, min, maximum, step, width. These are the arguments, the possible arguments for this function, right? And then under arguments, we have the description for each argument here. Now, note that the first three arguments, input ID, label, value, it doesn't have the default value given. For example, min equals NA, max equals NA, right? So in other words, if you don't provide a value for these first three arguments, like in number 1 and value equals 0, your function would not run, right? Because it doesn't have the default value given. On the other hand, the other arguments, min, max, step, width. So for example, width, if you don't specify a value for width, like in our example here, it's not a problem, right? Because default value is null, right? So R would just assume that the value for this argument will be width. The same with step max minimum. So for example, let me delete this and see what happens. And then let's run app. So it works, right? It works. However, let's try the other argument value, right? That doesn't have the default value. What if we delete this value equals 1 and then reload that and see what happens? And then it has an error, right? So the error in numeric input, argument value is missing with no default. So that's why, because it doesn't have the default value given, right? So Control Z to undo. So reload app. Oh, let's close this out first and then run app. There you go. All right, great. I'll see you in the next video.